We've got a call on
Right.
So we only need 3 o'clock.
All good to go? All right, we'll get started because it's 7 o'clock. Start off with the statement of acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge this land we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So item 2 is the attendance record. We are all here except for Mayor Shanks, who I've seen outside, so I'm assuming he'll be joining us shortly. So no formal apologies, no motions to grant leave of absence, no leave of absence, and maybe not non-attendance. We'll see how we go. All that thoughts. Item 3, are there any interests to declare for this meeting? No interest to declare. Item 4 is the confirmation of the minutes from the meeting on the 4th of November 2025, I believe Melbourne Cup Day, before the festive season. So have I got a mover, Christine, and a seconder, Ben, all in favour? Carry unanimously on the minutes from the last meeting, and we don't have any business arising from those minutes. So we'll move straight into it. So we'll start off with item 6 and the decision reports. The first one is the FY26 external audit plan. Renee, did you want to speak to that item?
Through the chair, I'm happy to take this report as I've read. It's just recommending the external audit plan prepared by external auditors, Dean Newbury, for this financial year, with the internal audit to occur in April and the financial statements in September. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? No? Ben, you got any questions? No, Mayor Shanks, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, the turnaround from here there wasn't as quick as I was hoping.
I saw you outside, so it's all good. Just one question that I had, Renee, was I was just trying to think, I was looking at the timelines suit. You're happy with all the timelines and what they've presented in their presentation, and there wasn't, I was trying to reflect on last year, there wasn't any timing issues last year, was there, that you have to remember for this year?
No, last year worked quite well. I think we've slightly tweaked the internal controls time frame, but we'll start that process very soon.
It just keeps rolling. Because you guys haven't got anything else to do. Cool. All right. So if everyone is happy with that, the officer's recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee recommend that Council endorse the FY26 external audit plan. Have I got a mover? Ben, seconder, Christine, all in favour? Carry unanimously. Okay, we'll go down to the next item. Is the mid-year budget update for December 2025. Erin, did you want to speak to this one?
Sure. So through the chair, so I do have a few comments. It's really just an overview of the report. In terms of the surplus, we've intentionally kept it the same as 246, so we were able to go through our operating budget and any additional expenditure that we needed for, and I'll go through the big ticket items in a minute. We were able to use existing budget funds, which was really fantastic. Everyone worked really well together with that. In terms of our capital expenditure, we have increased it by 241,000, and I think you'll find that the majority of that is due to a council decision to increase the 12th Street project by 280,000, I think, and there were a few other things as well. We didn't do a comprehensive review of capital this time. That will be in the third quarter budget review, just due to resources. So there might be a few things that would need to be tweaked that you'll see in the report as well. In terms of the capital revenue, so we did increase it by 221,000. Now, I just want to be clear that this isn't additional money that we're getting this financial year. This is something that was left out of the budget. So we received the money in 2024-25, but we needed to recognise it in the statement. So throughout the balance sheets and cash flow statements, it just required a little bit of tweaking. It was considered in some places and not in others. So just an administrative oversight. So some of the big ticket items that you'll see, so we've got the Norma situation. So we have received their budget review one, which was an extra 150,000 on their original budget. So we are in talks with them at the moment just about what that entails and how they're getting to that number. So if we've got any questions, I might handball them to Chris and Sharon, but we're working on that at the moment. The other thing was a budgeting error that we had at the beginning of the financial year, so that was in the excess of $273,000. We were able to offset that by 30,000, which we found in revenue, which we had understated, so that was a little bit helpful. We were able to fund that by existing budgets, so that was really good as well. We've got some savings with interest charges, so we did have some savings in the first budget review. Just with our workings, we've realised some more as well this review. We assume that was based on a opening cash flow position, which was actually better than originally forecasted. We also had some interest assumptions in our workings at the beginning of the year, which were a bit higher than what we're experiencing at the moment. So all in all, hopefully that's a good estimation of where we're going to land. So it's looking okay at the moment, so that's fantastic. And then just the last one is that we've come up with savings in the new initiatives budget of 131,000. That was a combination of funds that we don't need, funds that went to capital. There's various reasons, but it's within the report, so you can have a squiz at that as well. And just in terms of the ratios, just quickly, so the operating surplus will remain the same, just based on it. It's such a minor adjustments that we actually really made, although there's lots of changes throughout the budget, so that's pleasing. The net financial liabilities had a small reduction, and that was just taking into account the loan borrowings that we were talking about before, which is to do with the Tamblyn car park upgrade. And this asset sustainability has reduced, but it's still over 100%. So we're still in line with what we were proposing to make sure that we're keeping up with the asset renewals. So, any questions? Happy to take them.
I think Sharon just wanted to say.
Given it's quite topical at the moment with the current interest rate increase that was actually announced today, I just thought I'd let the committee know that LGFA last month had actually provided us a discount on our cash rate of for 25 basis points. So essentially the latest increase will have no impact on us because LGFA had already passed on that discount earlier. I think it was about mid-January as well. So,
are there any questions?
I know we've discussed this previously, but waste management is sort of one of those looming costs that, I mean, if you start from the biggest figures and work our way down, I think that's the $423,000 non-budgeted item where we're talking about waste tonnage. So this might not be, we might not be able to drill into it in this particular committee, but I guess I just am asking a little bit of advice on what we're trying to do to mitigate, if possible, how we manage that expense that is quite exorbitant on what we are used to seeing in the waste removal.
So there's two components. One of acknowledgement was a budgeting error, so internally we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. 150 day is quite annoying in that obviously we budget at the beginning of the year to try and forecast the annual expense from the fund for waste collection. We're working with Norman to try and understand why. I'm still not happy with the response I've got from Norman. If we take them at their word, they're saying it's additional tonnages. Now, on one level you could say let's educate our community, but the lag effect, or even if there's any effect of that, I'm not sure what's going to impact on this budget. So there's two things that need to happen. One, when we go into the budget coming up next, we need to, I think, build a level of flex or a contingency into that upcoming budget to allow, if we argue at bare minimum it's growth, say it was growth that wasn't accounted for, we need to have that built into the system. And the second is the longer term goal of working with Norman for community education to get more stuff out of the red bin, less things to landfill. But it would be remiss of us to hang our hat on that second one.
Can I say follow up? Yeah, sorry, that's my apology. The report does talk about the accounting area, but yes, I was talking about the tonnage as well, because I know we discussed this previously. And I guess the confusion that I find is previously we've been sort of front runners as a community, as a council for how we sort our waste, and it was something that we've been hanging our hat on a bit, and then all of a sudden it's changed, but we know it's changed only by your tonnages up in the general waste stream.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit sceptical on that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to understand that as well.
So I think one of the best things we can do is put more pressure on Norma to get their reporting, so that we can at least break it down to things we can understand. At the minute, it seems we're getting a flat figure with not much breakdown and assessment on their part. Very frustrating.
No, other councils having the same issue.
I did canvass my colleagues in Playford and Salisbury, and they are up, but for them they're not noticing it much because they've got a big report funds to draw from. I think their margin forever, it's still within their margin forever, I think. For us, it's having a market effect.
It would be good to get the supporting documentation for the number.
The sceptical side of me says that this happened when we changed collection bodies and we went from Veolia to solar. My conspiracy is that something's happened there. Now, whether Veolia were underreporting and were having a benefit, or whether solar are somehow reporting their tonnages differently. And I haven't got to the bottom of what it actually is.
Just some follow-up questions on that. This is for the first of the year. Are we likely to see this trend continue in the second 6 months? And another question, I was actually hoping you could just roughly outline what is the financial relationship between the council and Norman, because I just want to know how that feeds.
I think we've tried to make an allowance for that. Hopefully this budget increase will see us through the end of the financial year. We've tried to make an allowance there. In terms of the financial relationship, Norma is a subsidiary and the three councils have come together. And so there's three owners, Playford, Salisbury and Town Gore. And so essentially we will fund the waste collection services for that area. And it's quarantined into percentage funding capacity based on our population base, essentially. And so that's the nature of the relationship.
And purely driven by tonnes, or is there a basic component?
It's complicated, primarily driven on tonnages, but they also process our recyclables. And because we own the company, the arrangement should be that we get our recyclables processed for free, and that's subsidised by income that's generated by contracting out to other councils who aren't the owners, and we process their recyclables through a MRF that's sitting in Playford. And that revenue
one of the other audit and risk committees I sit on, we invite the equivalent organisation to come and present to us once a year, which helps inform us on what's going on. Possibly that would help get some information out of them.
Just a bit of insight into where Norma's at. That currently the CEO recently resigned, and I think it's fair that one of the deficiencies that we've had with Norma is the engagement of Norma with the member councils. Certainly, I sit on the board, so one of the board pressures now is on the incoming CEO, whether we want one, will be this topic of council communication. And even looking at even quarterly updates to the councils themselves. And obviously I fully support communication with the audit risk, but we've recognised the deficit and we're going to address that.
Because normally gets audited at the end of the financial year, don't they? So they have to support their revenue figures.
Oh, certainly.
And the allocation to each council.
Yes.
Just a comment, I just want to support the disciplined approach in decreasing the operating initiatives to cover the small decrease in the operating result. I think that's a good approach because you still would have had a surplus even if you'd let all of those go through. So I think it's good to maintain the budgeted surplus. And just a question for my clarification. Sprinkled throughout the report, it talks about developer delays, which has resulted in deferral of expenditure. And I'm just wondering, are there time limits on when those projects need to be done, and is there a risk that they'll all happen in 1 year, which could put some strain on the council?
Through the chair, David, you're in a position.
Yeah, I can attempt through the chair. So the challenge around those developments is the development stages, and certain infrastructure needs to be built along with those stages. They are behind in some of our major developments like Springwood around those stage development and delivery programs, which means that we're anticipating a road to be built in the current financial year, but it's actually been delayed by another 6 to 12 months, depending on their stage releases. We're in a fortunate position at the moment that most of our major developments that are on the go, those staging plans continue, so it just pushes out the works across the board. The challenge is going to come when we realise the cut and structure plan in the next 12 to 18 months, when all that comes on board, and whether they're speedier at delivery. And we're not sure of the consequence of that yet, and there may be a time that we have more than we would normally deal with, but we'll have to plan and budget for that accordingly.
Yeah.
So at the moment it's not a major issue, it's just if any of that gets front loaded by the state government, it could be challenging.
Yeah.
But we'll be in the tent, so to speak, so we'll have an understanding. Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
I guess just to talk to the growth side of things, I've actually seen in the past, well, certainly felt like in the past, us wind up our machine for growth that ultimately never came or is still coming. And I think that sometimes put us in a position where we might be ready, but we're probably preempting something. So I'm always about being proactive, but I think there's a balance here where we can actually wind up properly to accommodate, because we can see what's on the horizon. But if we don't get quite right, we can do that supplementary with contractors and whatever. That's not to say it's that easy, obviously, with the industry, the way that it goes. And, you know, I understand some of the challenges that Chris and the team will be up for. But I think some of that, then the trickle down of how that works and the like. Springwood, for example, was a major development that was coming onto our books, and we're at stage 3 of 10, however many years on. So we certainly need our planners, we certainly need all that, but the horse before the cart, I think, was something that we potentially might have done in the past. As an elected member, that's how it felt.
budget, but then it was 33 the same time last year. So I sort of went, oh, you know, we're a bit behind, but it seems to be like the trend when you have your back end
Yep.
year.
Yeah, through the chair, we've recently signed some fairly significant contracts in that space for delivery of works over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
So that spend will ramp up over the next 6 months for sure. Yep.
And I don't think, I mean, this is just an assumption, but the state election, there doesn't seem to be any slowing down or anything. Like everything's
No.
on track. Yeah.
Yep.
Business as usual. So
Yep.
that's good, because otherwise you have the year of the state and local elections. The calendar year, not the financial year. Very good.
Can I just ask a question of the Brains Trust? And I apologise to Erin, I hadn't noticed it till tonight. Just looking at the table on page 19, the one on, I think the green arrow for expenses, say employee costs as an example, should actually be pointing down,
Yeah.
and the red arrow should be pointing up on the expense side.
As long as you understand the legend, it's all right.
Because obviously the expenses are inverse of the revenue side.
And I think the total expenses number in the variance column is the negative 246, but I think that should be positive 246, but it's hard,
Okay.
because it's a
No,
increase
it's
in
increase.
expenses.
So it's unfavourable.
Yes, correct, correct. Apologise for picking that up. We'll just make it over next time.
And there's on page 29, I think, your percentage of year-to-date budget percentage in about the middle on appreciation and amortization of negative 11.9. I think that's just been swapped or transferred to the other numbers as well. Negative 11.9.
Page 29, did you say?
28, that's it.
Page 20, oh yes, you're right, sorry, page 28, yep. The depreciation, amortization, impairment line,
Yeah.
and the finance cost line, I think, swapped, or that percentage is
percentage,
that
yeah.
number.
Yes, you're correct.
Oh, good one.
Not proud of that one.
They just put there to test you.
Yeah, so it's absolutely test. Christine didn't pick it up. Oh my goodness.
Just too trusting.
I failed every test,
Cool. If there's no more comments or questions, thank you for your report.
I did just have one last question, and I know we've got to the report and everything, but I guess, well, I think I've taken this out of your book, Natalie, before, but what's sort of keeping this up at night? Where do we see an adjustment that we might need to make that's sort of a material nature and not just business as usual over in the numbers? We touched on the Norma stuff that's niggling, and I know that is on your radar, CEO, but just, I guess anything else? I know we touched on the projects. We have had some capital projects that have blown out a month or two here and there. It all happens, but bottleneck is certainly a theme that I know this councillor in the past, it sort of skews our financial position.
Yeah. Two things for me, the waste side that we've talked about. Second one probably is the capital project side. So obviously we're pushing hard to deliver on what we said we're going to try and deliver. That's probably the other piece that's keeping us awake at night. But apart from that, nothing else is particularly bothering me. But yeah, certainly those two pieces.
And sorry, just to follow up, if I can, Natalie. And I guess the projects finishing 30 June and all being handed over isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as we are communicating and how that actually works through.
Absolutely.
Because I think what's happened in the past is more about when capital expenditure hasn't actually been fully realised because the projects haven't been finished and invoices paid, and then a false sense of security rolling through because your financial ratios are reporting more favourable than you budgeted, but they're superficial favourable, not actuals, and then all of a sudden, and again, when we talk about capital expenditure, when we're rating on collecting revenue and operating, and then we're increasing borrowings to do our capitals, but it's how we translate that appropriately, I think, which I think we get a lot better at. But just around, if we do see some lag, we get on the front foot and make sure we're communicating that through a budget process that we're starting for this end of this chamber and the next, start of the next.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think that's the good thing about the quarterly budget review is that, you know, it is a very agile approach, and so it is truing things up each quarter to reflect what's actually happening, and then also reprioritising. And you know, I was going to say, you know, it's a great report. There's so much work that Erin makes it look easy, but there's so much work that goes into this. Because you think of all the project managers that she said to talk to get the information and make an adjustment for something that's been passed in council and all that kind of thing. So good work on the report.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's good to have it
thing
trued up.
as well, like just with what Nathan was talking about, we have added in a new section into the monthly finance report about emerging risks. So we are trying to identify, I guess, those things, and it's not so much from a capital point of view, but more so from an operating, the things that are keeping Chris, I guess, up at night, so we can communicate them to you before they come to this report, so that when it comes to this report, it's not a surprise. So if there's any tweaks in the way we are reporting, we're happy for feedback as well.
Sorry if I can just jump in there as well. Yeah, absolutely. I saw in the last report that you were asking elected members to provide feedback on that report, and I think that's a good move. I think as elected members, we actually do need to take a little bit of stock and talk in the budget deliberations in the middle of a council meeting, brainstorming how that template could look. I think probably landed flat, but it's certainly on our radar and certainly something I'll try to bring up. But yes, that residual risk, that's the reason I was able to speak so confidently about Norma, for example, because that discussion is happening in the chamber, and I think that is a really good thing.
And through the chair, sorry, we can add capital to that, perhaps, if that's something that you guys want to see.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
There's nothing else on the mid-year budget update. We've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit Risk Committee receives the mid-year budget review report, which notes the FY26 mid-year budget review with no movement in the operating surplus of 246,000, notes an increase of 241,000 in capital expenditure, an increase in capital income recognised of 221,000, and also recommends to council that the mid-year budget review as contained in attachment 1 be adopted. Do I have a mover? Christine, seconder? Ben, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, so the next item, 6.3, is the policy review. Susie, do you want to talk to this one?
Hello? Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Apologies. Through the chair, I think the report's fairly comprehensive in talking about these policy documents. I guess just to really quickly summarise very simply the three policies recommended to you as the committee to recommend that council adopts to have had fairly minor not minor updates, but Renee, as the policy author, had done a good review of those when they came through for governance review. That was very minor updates. Same along the lines of the civic centre venues policy. Just looked at when the governance review occurred of that one, we just moved some of the information that was transposed into the new template to a different section, but that's part of the ongoing education piece with the policy templates. I think the service level policies speak for themselves in terms of the fact that some of the measures are not tangible sort of measures. They're historically very outdated and haven't been maintained. So
I've only got one question. I saw it in one of the service level policies that recommended to be revoked anyway, but there was reference to residential facilities, and I'm just wondering if Gawler has any.
No.
No.
Must have been sold them or something.
Not sure whether that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I talked as if you had residential facilities, but it had, the policy was so old.
Yeah.
So
No,
good,
no.
I have any.
Template this by, I think.
Yeah. Well, that would be a whole set of risks if we just discovered that. That was it.
Any other questions or comments? No? All good.
Just for members' benefits, are you able to speak, CEO, just in and around some of the things we're looking into on sale and disposal of land assets and what this policy actually opens us up for, and how, as an organisation, there's potential benefits that we're looking into as well?
Certainly. Apart from the fact that we obviously want to bring our policy suite up to date, going forward as a council, we've got actually quite a lot of council-owned land that we're not currently utilising, and so we've identified that one of the first steps is to do an internal review to understand what we need to keep for strategic future need, and then potentially what is surplus to need and could be considered for sale opportunities. Now, I've never suggested that council recklessly disposes of land. There's nothing worse than selling a parcel and realising to buy something for a future need. But this policy is looking to put the framework in place for council to go through that process of how they consider the potential sale of land. And in fact, it's not in this coming budget, but in this coming 12 months, I think there'll be reports that go to council looking for council to consider certain pieces of land without preempting the outcomes. Where, as officers, we're going to recommend that council has a think about the strategic future need, and if for no other purpose, there might be an opportunity to pay down debt, for example. If council is of mind that it wanted to reduce its debt burden, it would be a way to fast track some of that. But again, you don't want to do that at the expense of letting go of a strategic asset. So we still need to have that discipline.
Especially if they're low income producing, or is there a way that we can increase revenue at the landfill?
That's correct.
And just for the members' benefits, I think what is being accepted about the approach is exactly that. We are assessing these parcels and we're looking at what's the potential return on investment. And again, when we talk about return on investment, we're not talking about just money flash in the pan, and yes, there's an ability to pay down debt, but that's not something that we can bank on in the future because you've only got one parcel. It's also about looking at where the market sits and how we can strategically work with the market as well to maybe help see a land parcel utilised in a better way than it's currently being utilised, and not paying the $30,000 a year to slash it, for example. Those sorts of things I think is a good thing to be looking at.
Sorry, just triggered a thought, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair. It might be that there's a potential to partner with a developer, for example, if we thought there was going to be a beneficial outcome for the community. So there's various options, but this policy helps us navigate that.
There's no other questions or comments? I think it's very well done. I've reviewed a lot of policies in my career, and the new ones are very slick. So and really easy to understand. So well done. I know it's kind of eating the elephant with the amount of work that needs to be done, but it's off to a good start. So well done, team. It's not easy. The officer's recommendation is that we adopt the first three policies, that we authorise the CEO to make any amendments to the adopted policies in part 1 of a minor or technical nature if required, and then revoke the following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 policies and service level agreements, service level statements. Do I have a mover? No, Neshaint, seconder, Ben, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay. And move on to item 7, which is the information reports. The first one being the external audit opinions. Do you want to speak to those? They're pretty much what we signed off on in November, and it's all been.
Just to verify that we didn't tell you a lie.
We actually have audit opinions. Okay, very good. I need to move it, don't I, for that one? Yes. Yep. So the officer's recommendation is that we note the audit opinions relating to the FY25 general purpose financial statements and internal controls. Have I got a mover? Christine, seconder. Ben, seconded. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay. Item 7.2 is the annual business plan, budget and budget parameters timetable. Renee, did you want to speak to that one?
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. I guess for the audit committee's attention, we are proposing to have a special audit and risk committee meeting on Tuesday the 31st of March to have a look at the draft budget for recommendation to council.
Are there any questions or comments? No. Ben, did you have anything?
So has it been developed already, or you're in the process of?
In the process.
And I see you talk about changes in underlying economic indicators and assumptions in some of these. Do you have a general feel for where they're going, or is that being developed now?
So that was actually developed in December. So that was actually went to council in December. So that just basically gave the general parameters of or guidelines to staff for when they're actually considered about, what the indexation is. Obviously, our salary increases are linked to enterprise agreements, and then I think at that point in time we were thinking that the CPI and inflation was going down. So we sort of did indicate, I think it was about 3% as an appropriate level of indexation of that cost. So obviously, we might need to reassess that as we go, but basically the budgets, all the submissions have actually been received from staff, so which is in line with those general parameters. But that 3% is probably more of an overall increase in expense. There will be some plus and minuses and all that sort of stuff, but we sort of target an overall 3% increase as an acceptable, as a starting point, and all that sort of stuff as well. So, but yeah, we're just in the process of analysing, bringing it all together. And the first workshop that's with council is on the 17th of February. So, so that will be the first presentation of what the recurrent budget is, which represents about 95% of our budget. So if we need to make savings, it's actually in the recurrent budget that we will need to do that, or get the biggest bang for our buck. So yeah.
Just one comment I would make, and it's on page 121 where we talk about the various components of the rate revenue. Where we talk about the 2% growth in new development, there was an area last year where growth was slower than expected, as Mayor Shanks has alluded to. We're looking to take a very conservative approach to our estimated growth number. Sharon and I are still working out what conservative looks like, but I'd rather, what's the old saying? You can spend a surplus, you can't spend a deficit. So I'm looking to go into council preempting a lower growth figure than might materialise. So, for example, this isn't the number, but it could be. We might say we're only going to estimate 1% growth because we know we can estimate that with a certain level of surety. And do you know what? Great if growth comes in at 2, and that can go through to the bottom line, rather than me having to go back to council and say, look, we have to try and balance this thing midway through a budget cycle. So it's just one thing we are treating very cautiously this year that we learned from last year.
And I think just to add to that as well, as to sit there and say that new development growth, we're not using that in the first instance, like to actually fund our existing operations. So when we actually put the recurrent budget together, we're probably having a revenue increase that's actually excluding that growth and comparing that to our recurrent expenditure as well to work out what that gap is. And so then essentially that's where the indication of how much we may have to move in our recurrent budget, or how much we have to actually pull back what we would call our initiatives budget to actually allow for that, and then that growth income is to fund new services that either come from growth or something that we have reintroduced or introducing because of the impact of growth on overall as well. So that's a bit of a different approach as well that we're actually taking with regard to that growth figure as well, rather than sort of saying, oh well, we're going to take the benefit of growth to fund our existing operations, where we should actually be taking growth because we should actually be adding new services, or there's going to be a new service impact as a result of that growth. So
it's very interesting, right? And so you're talking about growth being new developments coming online, right?
Yeah.
And
new assessments, yeah.
Yeah. So presumably that's also going to drive expenses, since you're trying to hold your budget as is and off to the side and try and estimate what the value is, and then but also trying to factor in those new expenses as well.
So yeah. So it's really hard because it tends to be is that we get the revenue from the growth for the new assessment probably before there's a bit of a lag in the expenditure. So it's always a difficult thing is to sit there and say, okay, well, what's the increase in expenditure because of growth? And I think that's what we're trying to get a bit more of a handle on. Now, while growth is probably a bit smaller, so we can sort of have that understanding. So when the growth escalates, we can sort of then say, okay, well, this is the expected increase in our base cost because of that growth.
Yeah. So you can just expand on that thought. That's something I know Mayor Shanks was alluding to earlier. If I use the workforce as an example, my goal is probably to stretch the workforce's capability as much as I can within reason before I make that investment in an additional staff member, so Parks team. So I'd rather do it that way than over-invest initially and carry that when they might not be 100% utilised.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a balance, and that's where contractors come in, potentially to help manage the elasticity of that point.
Can I just add to that as well, and also see what is a flash of the pan, or we need to fund this now, and then what is more sustainable as expertise, whatever comes into play. But I guess the growth piece as well, how good would it be if we managed to get into a position where we know a new suburb's coming online and we know the factor of what we need to allow for per square metre on the new road that ultimately is going to come into our responsibility, and what that looks like as a factor in depreciation when that asset ultimately comes online, that we can then cross-calculate for, along with the playground, along with the footpaths. And then at what point does those factors then equate to a new FTE or a part FTE? And how many new assessments do we need to be able to fund that? And it just goes back to consistency, because when we talked about Norma, it's really hard to understand what we need to budget if the tonnage is out, because then we can't go back to that resident and say, hey, we need more money because your neighbour's dumped more than we calculated. It's that's a tricky one. Like whether or not we ever get there, but the appetite certainly to understand that is certainly there.
I think it's also probably a bit of mindset in our staff as well, because I think that everyone can sort of, because we are a growing council, everyone can sort of sit there and say, oh, the increase is growth, the increase is growth, the increase is growth. I need it because of growth. And I think that that's where we probably just need to get a bit more discipline, as to sit there and say, actually, you need to justify the increase and say, and try and actually demonstrate that it is actually due to growth, as opposed to it's just an easy, you know, it's probably the normal thing. It's an easy excuse that no one can actually disprove in that sense. But because I would sit there and say the argument of, yes, our increase in our tonnages might result in an increase in cost because of the disposal thing, but there should actually be some reduction on the collection side, because Norma's fixed costs aren't changing. You know, it's only their variable costs that are changing because we're growing. So where are we getting the benefit of the reduction in the cost to collect? Because they're probably not sending any more trucks out. They're picking up more, but they're not sending any more trucks up. So where are we getting that benefit? Where I suspect they're just adding to their fixed costs, and they're adding to the disposal cost as well. So that's the challenge, and I think that that's the approach that we need to take as well, is to sit there and say, okay, well, what's our fixed cost at this point in time? How much can we stretch that fixed cost before we actually need to do that step increase from that perspective?
It's quite a complex process. I mean, they make it look easy. But you're basically sort of going, okay, so here, this is where we feel the budget will be for next year. This is what they did in December. And then you go to all the different stakeholders, and everyone puts their budget bids in and goes, this is my wish list, this is what I want out of the budget. And then you have to work out what you can do and what you can't do, prioritise it all, and then you go out to community consultation and you ask the community, what do you want? And then a whole lot of other stuff comes in, and then you come up with a final figure, and then you work out, well, how much is that going to increase rates overall? Is that acceptable or not? And we've had this a couple of years ago. If it's not acceptable, then you have to cut out all the things in the budget to get it to the right level. So then you come up with a number, and it's like magic. Is that the process, pretty much?
That's how we like process. However that happens that way.
I think for context, we're coming to an election year.
Yep. It's election year.
And thanks to the council, I'll do my level best to try and make sure that the rate rise doesn't become the topic of conversation. I'd rather have the focus on the projects that are in the budget.
The process you've gone through, I describe it as stuffing hollow logs for winter, and we've seen earlier today exactly why, and you can unwind that as necessary.
And also, I think the appetite around the room as well is not necessarily, so we thank our CEO to have that on his radar, or on, we don't want necessarily headlines. However, the ultimate would be great to be some of these systems that we implement and are actually election proof, because I do fear, the thing that keeps me up at night is sometimes we're embedding some of these great processes and whatever, and they're not at maturity enough yet to be embedded, that you can get a couple of personalities come on that just want to pull pins out of grenades, and all of a sudden say, oh, well, why don't we just cut half the staff? Do that, and I don't want a budget that's 0% rate increase, because we haven't done our appropriateness in the education piece, and that was like the pie in the sky sort of examples, but that is the bit where I think our processes and our systems, I think, need to flow through. You see state government departments, schools don't shut down when a government changes. Yes, there's education funding that gets tweaked and whatever else, but kids still can get to school. So yeah, it's how do we get our local government operating like that, and provide our elected members, current and future, with the confidence that they can vote on something because it's the right thing to vote on, not just because you're going to get voted in next election.
I think, with the whole productivity point, you saw that in the rather than going, oh no, that's always done by a contractor. It's like, well, no, we've got capacity, let's do it in-house and save some money. Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee note the budget parameters and timetable for the preparation of the FY27 annual business plan and budget. I've got a mover. Mayor Shakes, seconder, Ben, all in favour, carried unanimously. Thank you. Right. And the next item is the governance compliance update for Q2. Susie, did you want to talk to this one?
Through you, presiding member. Again, I'll just largely take it as read, just a couple of minor comments on a couple of areas. I confirm the legislative updates have been processed as referenced. I'll next be turning a bit of attention as well as to continuing to work on the policy work. I'm trying to get all the delegations redone again. It's actually it's not an uncommon thing that I've found being here at Town of Gawler. The sector is finding it difficult. There was a lot of legislative change second half of last year, hence why a lot of the legislative alerts were quite lengthy. And with all the different acts that apply to local government, they don't all apply to Town of Gawler, so there's not work on every single one of them. But obviously, if there's a legislative change under the Act, as I referenced, that has to go to the Council to obviously update the head delegations to the CEO, and then that filters down. So it's a little bit of a process where sometimes you feel you've just about got one raft of changes and everything updated, and then you get hit with another one to sometimes keep on top of. But I think reviewing the number of prescribed officers, which is set by the CEO, and the Act doesn't give you much guidance, so we looked at other councils' lists and who they prescribed, and the reasoning behind certain positions having to submit a return, and whether or not they're sub-delegated financially and things like that. I think we've removed some of the positions from the listing, and we've removed sub-delegations from the expenditure policy. It sort of all ties in together a little bit. So I think we should be able to report that this is completed to you by the next update. And in the meantime, we've also got some confidential orders to be reviewed, so can report to you on that as well. I won't jump ahead too much, but the policy review schedule is being worked on. I've nearly finished that. I guess as the project sort of has progressed in its infancy, and having a look at the out-of-date documents and how out-of-date some of them actually are, changed a little bit of the approach as I've been revising it, in that I think it's important to get the ones that are not necessarily current, and the service level ones are a case in point that the committee's dealt with already tonight, off of the website so that they're not publicly available. So instead of sort of scheduling those policies to be revoked across the period that the schedule pertains to, I'm sort of grouping them together so we can get that library that's publicly available up to date and current as quickly as possible.
Are there any questions or comments? No.
Will we see the updated delegations?
There'll be a delegations register pulled that will be available publicly on the website. At the moment, it's just the head delegations that council have delegated to the CEO, while I reconfigure, or using the software, while I make sure that all of those updated provisions are sub-delegated as they should be.
With the legislative updates, there's nothing, has that been discussed at a LGA kind of level of how that can be done better? Because you've all got the same issue, like, does everyone understand what's happening, like the update legislation, and then you've got to make sure that you've captured it all in everything. So it could be a common problem, you think?
Yeah, so there's, I guess, two parts to legislative updates. One is that how they affect delegations directly. We use a software system called Reliances, which is informed by the LGA. So the LGA get their legal partners, Norman Waterhouse, to basically go through, have a look at all the powers that can be delegated to the CEO or that are delegable powers. They then liaise with Reliances, the software company, to give them that information. We then get an alert once they're in that software system ready to go. There is some lag time from that process in terms of delegations, but that's I guess the LGA's commissioning that work to be done, and we get a notification from the software system. So in terms of delegations, that's how we might know there's some coming because we know that acts are changing or due to change, but in the system we use, we can't sort of recall delegations to, say, Chris's position or sub-delegations to Sharon's until the system is updated, and that's done by the software company in collaboration with the LGAs. In terms of just keeping abreast of what's coming in those legislative updates, what might have been gazetted, what acts may have been assented to, or regulations made by ministers. Generally, I'm finding like the major key sort of points are often covered in the weekly LGA news or covered in an email through the Governance Officers Network for those that are applicable to governance. I think staff within the planning area, or there's different sector sort of associations and groups that different areas in council belong to. So I think if there was a significant change coming to that was specific to dog and cat management or something, I would hope that the sectors consulted as before, you know, these changes are coming or these new regulations are coming. The changes to legislation, the impact on delegations is something that has been discussed amongst Governance Officers Network. Not sure there's an easy solution given the time it takes to sort of get those updates.
As long as you're all in it together for things. But no, well done. As I said, like the same with the policies and the procedures, is that compliance just seems to be never ending. So as I said, it's eating the elephant and just keep going.
Yeah.
So I know you're working on this and then something else comes in, and as you said, then you update the delegations. And so just, you know, it's just recognise all the hard work that you're doing, and it's nice to get these updates to show exactly, and for you to also reflect on, you know, what you've achieved. So well done.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? No? So I've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit Risk Committee receives and notes the governance compliance update for Q2. Do I have a mover? Christine, seconder? Ben, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8 is items listed for discussion. There are none. Item 9 is the questions without notice. Are there no questions without notice? Item 10, there's no motions without notice. And just before I close the meeting, I just wanted to recognise the passing of Councillor Paul Kosh in January. I'm trying to think who was around. When he was on, he was a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, and you know, huge contribution. Especially, you know, it was when I started, and that was sort of the COVID era, and so I still remember sitting in this room with COVID and the interest rates and you know what was happening, and things were shut down, and you know it was really interesting time. So I remember him fondly for that, and you know navigating you know the council during that time, and then you know the way that we came out of it as well. So just wanted to recognise that. Don't know whether Chris or yep. Thank you. All right, if there's nothing else to discuss, I'll close the meeting at 8 o'clock. Must be record. Thanks everyone. Yeah, we're doing
Sorry.
and the next, what was the next meeting? Is in May, but we've got a special meeting on the 31st of March. Yes, that's in your diaries.
And there's an elected member
members to
Yeah.
the information session. So if we can send an invite, for each of the information sessions that as audit committee members you're more than welcome to attend, and all that sort of stuff as well. So.
Will they be online?
Sorry?
Will they be online?
I don't know yet.
For our,
Budget.
like any other information briefing,
Yeah, I think the only reason when we don't is when we talk about early on when we talk about rating decisions.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time we're just spitballing
Yes. Yeah.
and we don't want to put any unrest. Yeah, because we often spitball a bit.